Hey guys, in today's episode and everything, we're just going to go on a little brief history with Kristen. This is actually a comment by one of our viewers, VW3610, and they're just asking how you started in the horse world, what kind of riding you did, and did you have a horse growing up?
Yeah. So I think I started like every other little girl in the world. I was very fortunate. I started about, the age like 3 or 4. We got a horse. We lived on 10 acres in Hollister, California. And my dad grew up riding horses on reservations in Arizona. And he worked in the farms and did a lot of that stuff. And he always had a dream of having his own like ranch or ranchette. So I can't say that like the horse was bought for me originally, but that is the lifestyle that we wanted. And I'm kind of different in the sense that I have done a lot of disciplines over the years. Predominantly growing up, I did Western. I did a little bit of barrel racing. I did trail riding. I did Western pleasure. I did all of that stuff. I was so fortunate growing up in Hollister, which is a horse community, that there was excellent instruction in all of that stuff. And I mean, literally Doc Bar was right down the road for me. So yeah, which is kind of cool. So, I mean, for any of you quarter horse people, Doc Bar is pretty famous. And, a lot of that too, though, was the old fashioned training that maybe I don't necessarily agree with anymore. But I did have some progressive people in my life that talked about, working with the horse and instead of taking something from the horse. But a lot of my youth was me learning and sitting with the horses and studying them. I feel that I did a lot of that. Did a lot of sitting there, reading their body behavior, their language, their communication at a young age, and really all the way growing up into college, which I'll get into later. I really thought that I wanted to be a vet because I was very passionate in caring for them. As a young person, we probably had about 4 or 5 horses at a time. We had quarter horses and Morgans predominantly, which looking back, I feel was such a blessing because those 2 breeds can do just about anything you want them to do. And so it's not like, warm bloods, right, that don't really do Western. So as a young person, I feel, and I feel this way with my students too, that it's really important to experiment and learn. And I also feel that that makes me able to understand my clients more. I have people that ride Western. I have people that do dressage. So my journey from kind of backyard rider into show rider, if you will, started, I'd say for the first like 12 to 13 years of my life, I did Western. And I loved it. And then one day I decided to try out an English saddle and I was hooked. And I took lessons at a barn called Flying Tail Farms. And I really decided I was absolutely fearless and I wanted to do 3-day eventing. And I worked for them for a few years. I traveled all over the country with my horses and, Washington, Montana, East Coast. I, did it all, working with them with off the track thoroughbreds. And, as well as my horse at the time, I had a Canadian sport horse. Her name was Kelly. I also had a appendix quarter horse that I got to show. His name was Max. And then I also had a off the track thoroughbred by the name of Seattle Spy, aka Addie. And if you do a Google search on her, you will actually find a really cool article called Seattle Spy, the Double Agent. So I really recommend if you have some time that you do that. It's kind of fun. She did show jumpers and I turned her into a 3-day event horse. And at that point, I stopped eventing because I entered my college years. And while I love eventing, there was very long distances that you had to travel to go to shows. And that was not really feasible while I was in school. One of the things that if I were to look back on my 3-day eventing career, that I absolutely loved about that sport was the camaraderie between barns. And I don't know if it's because the way the sport is designed, where you're together for a long period of time. Like when we would go to Montana, we'd be up there for 2 weeks. And we'd all be staying on the property, and everybody gets to know everybody, and everybody's helping everybody. And, when you come in from a cross-country course, you have your whole barn team there helping you. And I do think that for me, that really kind of set in like what a barn should be about. Everybody needs to help everybody. And I really try to transfer that to here, where it's not an individual, it's a team. And when I have a quote that I like a lot that says, when the tide rises, so do all the boats. And to me, it's not a self-centered thing in that sense, but when you help everybody, right, and everybody gets better, you get better. Mm-hmm. It's the culture of life.
Yeah.
And I just found that a beautiful part of the sport. I don't know if it's still that way, as I have changed my pattern in life. But that was something that I really enjoyed. So I took about a year or two where I wasn't riding as much. I actually ended up at Georgia Tech. I was on a side note, I was also a semi-pro semi-pro tennis player. And I really used that side of my tennis experience to learn about sports psychology. Anybody that knows anything about tennis knows that it is a very deeply psychological sport, because you can beat yourself up pretty quickly, especially in between the points. And I did a lot of studying, a lot of research, a lot of psychology classes. And I really try to take that into horseback riding. So if you notice, we did a video on horse show nerves, for example. We will also do one on like controlling anger and trying to stay emotionally grounded for your horses. These are things that I find that I've spent a lot of my life working on, because horses need that stability from us. And that is something that I have spent a lot of time learning from. After that year or two break, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to go the veterinary route. This is it. That's what I want to do with my life. And so I ended up at UC Davis. I started out as an animal science and management degree there. I took a lot of veterinary courses. And at that point, I started teaching the children's riding program at Kristen and Dressage Center. And that's also where I got my experience learning how to run a kids program, camps, all of those things. We have some videos on that as well, which I've transferred over into what I'm doing now. I have also taken a ton of equine biology courses, equine hormone courses, reproduction, neurology, physiology, all of those things. That is in my background. I have interned at dairy farms. I think I said in one of the videos we did, I did a rotation at a slaughter facility, which was interesting. And I also interned at a vet hospital for about a year. And working at the vet hospital, I really realized that, and working simultaneously at the vet hospital and working at a horse boarding facility teaching the riding program, I realized that you are either on the horses or under the horses. And that at that point in my life, I needed to make a decision about which I wanted to be. And I have to say, I give a lot of kudos to people that are veterinarians. I am not emotionally strong enough to do it. I'm not. I ran into so many situations where I felt as though the choices of the owners were not in alignment with the veterinarian's decision on ethics and my own as well. I also realized that our laws in our country, which is why another reason why I'm so passionate about, and Becca is too, about doing these videos on what animal rights are, because I realized that they are not enough. I would go into facilities where horses were being bred, stallions had crooked legs, you couldn't handle the mares. Like literally we had a place where we had to go into and we had to dart the mares with a gun, with a sedation gun, to get near them, to sedate them or to vaccinate them, to give them the proper vaccinations, and they were pregnant. And I'm sitting there going, what are we going to do if something goes wrong during the delivery? We've got this unhandled mare. And then I would ask the vet, like, I mean, there's no resources for any of this. This is like a puppy mill. And the bottom line is there wasn't, because the animals were fed. They were being vaccinated. Their hooves looked okay because the same thing, they'd sedate them. And yet this woman has, or not just one, it's many times that I see this, didn't even know how many animals they had. They would call in literally, and the vet would look at me and goes, okay, what's that person's name? And I'd tell them. And he said, oh no, double the number of vaccines to get ready. She doesn't know. And so I'd ask him, I say, well, you know, why are we going out to this place? And he's like, because nobody else will. And we have to take care of these animals. We have to see what situation they're in. So I spent about a year or so doing that, following him around. I learned a tremendous amount about the veterinary world, what they go through, the sleepless nights, the ethics in the business, the stresses in the business. And I do feel that that really carried me forward into kind of what I do now, because I never lost my passion for doing research on health and wellness in horses and trying to better horses. But I had decided at that point that I wanted to create my own environment in which we could do it. My own clients, our own people that kind of aligned in our thought process. So I made the decision at that point that that's what I wanted to do. And I was at a dressage barn, and I decided that I really wanted to start competing. And so in dressage, so I bought a 3-year-old Hanoverian gelding by the name of Wincento, aka sometimes my cousin Vinny. Or Big Cento, which my daughter likes to call him. And I brought him up from a 3-year-old all the way up to Prix St. George. At one point, he was top 10 in the country. I opted not to take him to the national championships back east because he was a gelding, and I was just basically out of college, starting my barn here. And I just thought, no, I got to put all my money into building this place. And once that happened, I transitioned him up here once we got our indoor arena built. And since then, you know, I look back and I think I have worked with probably close to 1,000 horses in my career. Been very, very blessed to do that with multiple instructors. Some that were Pan Am medalists, Olympians, and, you know, I just had no idea, you know, FEI level judges at the top of the sport. I mean, my first dressage instructor, I had no idea really at the time. I'd go in and clean a stall, and then she'd give me a dressage lesson. And here she was, one of the top judges in our country. And she taught me on my little quarter horse. I mean, but those kinds of people, Marianne Howard, and those kinds of people really do make an impact in your life. And she didn't have to do that for me. I couldn't afford that kind of lesson. But you get people like that give you a gift, and then they are willing to make an impression on you in the future on how you need to treat other people. So one of the reasons that we like to make these videos for you guys is kind of along, in my opinion, the same preface, that we think this information should be free. We think it should be out there in the public, accessible to people. And our sport is so cost prohibitive, and we don't want that. We want to try to break down those barriers because it benefits people and it benefits horses. So I would say, kind of community. Yeah, in the community. Yeah. So once I got up here, I probably have another 20 years of experience on that, of running a facility, working with horses, going to clinics and training people and using the sports psychology and bettering myself in the veterinary side of things, which I get really excited about research. And, and just hopefully, go from years to come. So I think probably in total I have, because I just count when you're a little kid, you sit on a horse, right? And you do learn by osmosis and seeing. So don't get me wrong there. But probably somewhere around, 36 years of experience in multiple disciplines. And I also feel that that's one of the reasons why we can cover so many disciplines in our channel. Becca is also the same way. She's done multiple disciplines too. It makes you a better person. So
it makes you well-rounded, and you can come up with different things for whatever on your horse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so thank you guys so much for joining us, and let me know if you have any thoughts about me. Okay.